Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, September 9th, 2019. That's 9/9/19. You know what to do when we have a day like that. Impeach the president. Okay, so fantastic. Where would you like to begin? Trump crimes against the United States? Trump crimes against humanity? Trump crimes against, I don't know what, common sense? I suppose we could start on any of those. You want to start off of Trump? We could start with new Jeffrey Epstein news. We could start with, I don't know. Who knows? I can't even tell you. It's all actually revolves around Trump. Let's see. There's serious stuff. There's not as serious stuff. Trump, I don't even know where this is coming from, but this morning, I think it's this morning, he's criticizing Mark Sanford because Mark Sanford is saying that he wants to jump in the primary race and primary Trump for the presidential race. And, of course, states reacting to that and the threat of others jumping in, too, by saying they're going to eliminate their primaries. That's another story. But I guess only natural that the first criticism of Mark Sanford would be, of course, what anyone's first criticism of Mark Sanford would be. He's a little bit weird, and he disappeared that time that his office, when he was governor of South Carolina, said he was hiking the Appalachian Trail, but he was, in fact, with a girlfriend in Argentina. And anyway, I don't know. So Trump, in his fevered brainworm way, has changed that into, well, she's from Argentina. And, you know, this is how his stupid brain works. Right? They do that. Don't they do that really like sexy dance there in Argentina or whatever? And they're Spanish, right? So it's what does she do? She's a flaming dancer. She's one of those flaming dancers. Flamingo, that's it. That's flamingo. Of course, it's not flamingo. It's flamenco. That's Spanish. And, if they're famous for their dance of any sort, I guess in Argentina, I think they have some affinity for tango in their cultural exchange programs. Anyway, that's a totally different thing, but that's, I don't know. It's tango. It's sexy. It's hot. It's flaming dancer. Flamingo. She's not a dancer. There's no indication that she's a dancer. This is where his brain is. He's sick. And he ought to be, honestly, he's just not to be let out in public at this point without accompaniment. And worse, he's president of the United States. So that's bad. I don't really care what happens to Mark Sanford, to be honest. There's plenty of other things going on. Oh, yes, right. He also apparently in the same speech and a couple times before apparently has mistakenly called the Appalachian Trail. He wants to refer to the Appalachian Trail as the Tallahassee Trail. Now, I don't think there is a Tallahassee Trail. Tallahassee, of course, nowhere near the Appalachian Trail, and so that sort of poses a problem. I know, like, down in the West Palm Beach area, not too far from there, you might find there's a major thoroughfare, the Tamiami Trail, but I don't think there is a Tallahassee Trail. I assume that by the end of the day, Trump will have ordered the U.S. Geological Survey to put Tallahassee on the Appalachian Trail or extend the Appalachian Trail. He'll perhaps order the Parks Service to extend it all the way to Tallahassee and then claim that old trail hiking hands have always referred to it as the Tallahassee Trail because that's where they're going. Has nothing to do with it whatsoever, but, I don't know. I'm not certain where you want to even start today's roundup, but that's why we have Greg. Greg knows where to start today's roundup, so here he is. So we'll just say, what the hell's going on, Greg? Hi.
So much.
Yes, it's so another one of those weekends.
Hey, let's start with this since you brought it up.
All right.
This is by Peter Wenner, and it's in The Atlantic. And the title just kind of says it all, along with the subtitle. The title is Trump is Not Well.
He is not. He's
accepting the reality
well
about the president's disordered personality is important, even essential. And Wenner goes on to talk about his history and pointing out that the reason that he opposed Trump had everything to do with the fact that he didn't think he was stable. He says, I didn't oppose Trump because I thought he was going to lose to Hillary Clinton. I thought he would, but as I said, he may well win. My opposition to him is based on something completely different, which is, first, I think he's temperamentally unfit to be president. I think he's erratic. I think he's unprincipled. I think he's unstable. And I think he has a personality disorder. I think he's obsessive. And at the end of the day, having served in the White House for 7 years and 3 administrations and worked for 3 presidents, one closely, and read a lot of history, I think the main requirement for president of the United States is temperament and disposition, whether you have wisdom and judgment and prudence. And he says, that's what I said at the time. The statement's been validated. Okay, it's got nothing to do with him deteriorating.
Although that is a problem.
And he says, if a clinical diagnosis is beyond my own expertise, Trump's psychological impairments are obvious to all who are not willfully blind. On a daily basis, we see the president's chaos. Remember chaos? We said that from the beginning. Unstable mind on display. Are we supposed to ignore that? If smoke is coming out from under the hood of your car, if you notice puddles of oil under it, if the engine's overheating and you smell burning oil, you don't have to be a car mechanic to know that something's wrong with your car.
Yeah.
Right? Or know the difference between a clip and a magazine.
Yes, that's true. Right.
For that matter. So I think that kind of nails it. And a whole lot happened over the weekend to kind of put that into perspective. I'm going to go through some of them quickly because there's just so much. There's the idea that you would invite the Taliban to Camp David on the anniversary of 9/11.
That's a good idea.
Or, like Liz Cheney put it, Camp David is where America's leaders met to plan our response after al-Qaeda, supported by the Taliban, killed 3,000 Americans on 9/11. No member of the Taliban should set foot there ever. The Taliban still harbors al-Qaeda. Okay, she's all right up to that point. And then says, but the president was right to end the talks. So in other words, you cause a problem, the problem solved for you by somebody else, then you take credit for the solution.
Yes, that is a great thing. I don't know whether I guess she figured Obama invited them and it was still hanging out there and they just
It was
accepted.
Obama or Hillary, one of them.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And so, good. Thank you for putting a stop to that. It's been outstanding for several years. Glad you finally ended it.
But they're still into doing it, so we'll see what happens. There's been quite a bit of pushback from both parties, so it's one of those unusual bipartisan, this is terrible kind of thing.
Yes.
Then we have, Brad Parscale talking to a California GOP convention, telling them that Trump will be a dynasty that lasts for decades.
Yes, like the Ceausescu's.
But not just that, there's this McKay Coppins article in The Atlantic. Inside Ivanka and Don Jr.'s fight to succeed their father.
Oh, fun.
Right? They're jockeying as to who's going to be, because it was always, Ivanka was always the chosen one, but turns out that Don Jr. is positioning himself well with the MAGA crowd. So whether this is to be first online to grift on the MAGA hat concession, or actually run for president, a lot of that depends upon what happens in 2020. But that's sort of out there. And so that happened this weekend as well. Yeah. We have, let's see, what else we have. We have manufacturing recession could cost Trump a second term. This is in Bloomberg. The president's trade wars are creating a scenario similar to 2016. For all the debate on whether the U.S. is headed for a recession, there's plenty of evidence that corners of the economy may already have tumbled into one. We talked about the RV sales from Indiana. After 2 boom years, the picture's changed for Americans' factories, says Bloomberg. Okay. We have more and more. Let's see. We have the whole fight over the weather stuff and the Sharpies. I don't know if you noticed, but the American Meteorological Society said, we, AMS, fully supports our colleagues at NOAA who consistently put the safety of the American public first and foremost. They work tirelessly employing state-of-the-art science to keep Americans safe. With respect to the press release that was issued by NOAA on Friday, 6 September, regarding the forecast of Hurricane Dorian, AMS believes the criticism of the Birmingham Forecast Office is unwarranted. Rather, they should have been commended for their quick action based on science in clearly communicating the lack of threat to the citizens of Alabama.
Yes.
And Greg Sargent notes that Trump doctored that weather chart, as we talked about with Sharpiegate, and NOAA also jumped at Trump's defense. By my count, something like this has happened at least 7 times.
Yes.
Right?
I would like to discuss that at some point.
All right.
That would be
Should I
very
read that
nice.
for you? We got other stuff to do.
Yes, but I will note for the record that my position on this is that NOAA did not issue that statement and that it is a forgery. It was issued by a press flack embedded in NOAA by the Trump administration, and that NOAA officialdom may have had absolutely nothing to do with it. I don't need to defend NOAA, and actually,
because it wasn't NOAA, really. It was
This
the
was a
minder placed
hijacked-
there,
yeah.
just like on Red October.
You should be thinking about it exactly as a forgery, as they sense the fact that he's president gives him the ability to embed someone who will follow his orders and steal their stationery, but that's it.
Hey, listen, if you're going to talk about process, you're going to make me talk about merry old England again.
Okay, that's fine, because that's still happening.
It is. Nice New York Times piece. Boris Johnson finds his party loyalists aren't as loyal as Trump's.
Oh.
And notes that for dispirited Republicans, though, this British Revolution has become an object lesson in how a center-right party can stand up to a wayward leader. And dispirited they are, I said, but lacking in judgment and courage they also are. Now, here's the interesting thing. We talked about John Bercow, Speaker Bercow.
Oh, yes, right.
Right. The
fun guy, he seems like.
the Barney Frank of British politics.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
And did you ever see Barney in action?
Yes, though he was not. Yeah, I mean, he knew exactly.
He was better at town meetings than he was at necessarily committees.
Mm-hmm.
But sharp tongue, put people in his place, kept things going, master of process, et cetera, et cetera. So the way it works in England, John Bercow was a Tory, but he was elected speaker. His job is to be impartial and keep a place running, which can be very raucous. Mm-hmm. And traditionally what happens is that when you become speaker, you basically become partyless. You become impartial.
I see. Well, yes, that's the hope, I'm sure.
And so the convention is that when you become speaker, you automatically get reelected where you stand for election because the other party doesn't run against you.
That's nice.
No, nobody runs against you. It's like you're the speaker, so just go ahead and get your seat, and we won't oppose you, either party, because you're neutral. That's the convention.
Okay. That is interesting.
Right? And
Sure.
the Tories are now bidding to unseat him after a Commons revolt because they felt like he was too nice to the other side. Or as Ian Dunn puts it, the government undermining convention so it could find a speaker who is more amenable to the executive and less vigilant about ensuring members of parliament have a voice.
Yeah.
Now, apparently they tried this before. And you know who ran?
This Tory party tried this before?
Well,
Or like
somebody tried
hundreds
to
of years
unseat
ago.
him
Oh,
because
okay.
they felt he was being unreasonable.
Oh.
And you know who he ran against?
No.
Nigel Farage. and of course Farage lost and Burke won.
Yeah,
it's
that's not
just,
gonna work
you know,
out.
it's that level of hubris and chutzpah to run against something like this. So just another,
Chutzpahs.
flagrant violation of convention.
Yes. That is interesting. I mean, I guess it's sort of functionally the same, except for the non-political part. Once you assume office, it's just assumed well, the party that holds the majority is going to win. So on the English side there, they just said, well, we won't bother with running against the guy. Why bother counting votes? The majority will win. So that's how, I guess, no one ends up running against him. But they're in danger of losing that majority, so it's not entirely clear how they can get rid of the guy.
Well, they don't have the majority now.
Right. Well, okay,
and one of the
that would
reasons
be
they
it.
don't have the majority is that one of their conservative MPs walked across the aisle and joined the Lib
Right.
Dems just
That's
while
right.
Boris Johnson was speaking. I think that was Philip Lee. And now, of course, the Tories are going to run for that seat
Yeah.
and try to replace him, which they might.
Okay.
But the latest polls out suggest that if the election were held today, that the conservatives may get the lion's share of seats, but not enough to form a majority. In fact, they would do less well than when Theresa May last ran. and they would be short of their majority, and that's not clear what that means. So in other words, as time goes on, they're going to do worse and worse, and so it's not clear what happens next. Now today, supposedly, Boris Johnson will ask for yet another time that they have a snap election. The opposition is expected not to agree, and Johnson wants an election, or he may have to resign, or there may be a no confidence vote. But those things can't happen after today because Parliament's prorogued.
Yeah.
By his design as of tonight. And so, the thing that he did in order to get what he wanted may be the thing preventing him from getting what he wanted.
I guess. Man.
Okay. All right. So you have that.
Maybe.
Let's see. We have other things here to go over. Lots of polling. I'll leave that for the moment. But we have a nice New York Times piece. These are my short takes on ending legacy college admissions. A country struggling with deeply rooted inequality need not continue an affirmative action program for successful families. We have the observation that a blow to Trump, MBS, Mr. Bonesaw, and Netanyahu. China is to invest $280 billion in Iranian sectors targeted by sanctions. So U.S. is now isolated from allies, Combus Lavasani.
Oh,
Lavasani?
I don't know.
You pronounce his name?
Where?
U.S. isolated from allies. Allies seeking separate banking systems. China investing where Europe can't. It was predictable from day one. When Trump left the Iran deal, the entire GOP foreign policy establishment is bankrupt. Then there's another piece from the Daily Beast. New Trump raids funds meant to deter Russia to pay for his wall. There's Trump regime blocking Dorian evacuees from getting off the boat from the Bahamas.
Getting on the boat, even. Well, I mean, they told them they would eventually block him from getting off. So they got... Okay, I got you. Right.
And then the Air Force is apparently investigating the bombshell report that the Air Force was paying vigorish to Trump by refueling in this small Scottish airport to keep it going because that was the closest one to Tunbury, where the Air Force personnel were supposed to stay overnight, where they couldn't afford to get drink and meals on their stipend, which was also designed to keep Tunbury going, both of which lost lots of money. But the Air Force is now having an official investigation because it's so bad and so obvious even they can't deny it's happening. And I guess the NOAA person doesn't work there.
Right. Although they will shortly, and that might become, I don't know, it could become part of Alabama very quickly.
So that's basically all the stuff that happened since I talked to you last, and that's quite a bit. More. We also have quite a bit of polling that came out over the weekend, and I think maybe I'll do that. And then after the break, I want to talk about a little bit Jeffrey Epstein and the MIT Media Lab.
Okay. All right, hurry up. It's like I'm out of breath. Okay, that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, polling. What do we have polling? We have the ABC Washington Post poll.
Okay.
It came out in two parts. Today's version
all right with that one.
Is basically everybody supports background checks.
That's nice.
Right. Expanded background checks and red flag laws have 80+% support across party ideologic lines as Congress returns to tackle gun laws. Dems maintain trust advantage over Trump 51-36 on this topic.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
I hope something happens.
Yeah. What they had is a lot of polling about where things stand in terms of the primary. The ABC Washington Post poll over the weekend, Biden 29, Sanders 19, Warren 18, Harris 7, Buttigieg 4, O'Rourke 3, Yang 3, Gabbard 2, helps her make a step toward making the next not the immediate one coming up, but the next debate. So Klobuchar 2. And then CBS had a series of individual states. Iowa, basically showing a three-way tie. Iowa, Biden 29, Sanders 26, Warren 17. New Hampshire, Warren 27, Biden 26, Sanders 25. Nevada, Sanders 29, Biden 27, Warren 18. South Carolina, Biden 43, Sanders 18, Warren 14. Or as Harry Enton summarized, all in all, Good set of numbers for Sanders, good but not awesome for Warren, Biden okay. So basically those are your three front runners. Everybody else not doing so well, although I believe in at least one of those polls, Tom Steyer got enough so that he's in the next debate too. So there'll be more than 10
wonderful.
and it'll be split.
Oh, that's good. I'm very happy about that.
Right?
Yeah.
So those polls are sort of semi-interesting.
Yes,
and there's a nice little piece by Nate Silver talking about the fact that outlier polls happen, and it was very good of Monmouth, who showed a very good poll for Bernie relative to Biden recently, declaring itself an outlier and praising the pollster, Patrick Murray, who's very good, for actually going ahead and publishing it, even though it didn't agree with the other polls. When you see a poll that you've done which is different than all the other polls, and then you decide not to publish it because your gut tells you it's wrong, even though the numbers say it's right, and therefore all the other polls agree, that's called herding, Herding.
Okay.
They herd all the polls together into a tight group. And that's bad policy, but some pollsters do it because they don't want to be embarrassed.
Well, that's
and the standard in the industry is, no, you
policy.
publish what you have if you think you did it right. And, of course, a lot of people do that, and a lot of people don't. So Patrick Murray's one of those who does, and that's why it's an A-rated poll.
You should aim for not being embarrassed. That's true. But
well, you'd like to get it right, but, you know,
yeah,
1 out of 20 is going to be wrong. That's the whole deal.
Damn. All right, do 19 polls and then go out of business.
Exactly. So in regard to what all those polls mean, it means that Biden retains the lead, retains strength, that people who thought he was going to collapse still maintains. But at the same time, when you look at the early states, it's actually a lot closer than that. And anybody can win, which makes this Politico story quite interesting. The title is, "It's a Deceptive Lead. Why Biden's Rivals Are Planning Around His Big Collapse." Most rivals have some variation of when Biden fails written into their campaign plans. And it's one of the reasons why I've kind of ignored Biden opponents, Biden rivals. They're not enemies. Why Biden rivals make a lot out of his gaffes. It's not what supporters of other people think of Biden. It's what Biden's supporters think of Biden that matters more than anything, simply because he happens to be in the lead. And he's got to lose that lead if anybody else is going to replace him. So
that's how it would work.
Expectation from the other side that what he just did was terrible and this is going to inevitably lead to this or that, it's only true after it actually happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly have experience in this country now with people who can make gaffe after gaffe and their supporters won't leave. So I guess that's, you got if it's going to happen to Biden, you're going to have to see people giving up on him as opposed to.
Exactly.
Okay.
And let me give you an example.
I mean, that can happen.
Say that. It can happen.
Sure.
But this is from the ABC Washington Post poll showing Biden leading. And Scott Clement, the pollster there, points out one post-ABC poll finding that might surprise some people. 61% of Biden's Democratic supporters say they'll definitely vote for him versus 38% of voters who support Warren or Sanders.
That is 38% who support Warren or
either,
Sanders.
Either Warren or
Sanders.
Sanders. In other words, 38% of Warren voters, 38% of Sanders voters say they'll definitely vote for them. 61% of Biden's voters say that.
Okay, so they're locked in.
So, everybody knows it's one of those
More
things
so
that if
others.
you read, Daily Kos or listen to progressive Twitter, everybody knows that there's no enthusiasm for Biden.
Right, and that's because the enthusiasm button is here, and you have to ask me if you want to have any enthusiasm.
Right, and part of it is because the actual voters aren't necessarily online.
Oh, or talking to us. That's possible.
Or talking to us, right? So I just point these things out because, it helps to explain how come he's still there after all the stuff I read about how he was going to collapse.
Yeah. Now, I think that makes surprisingly plenty of sense. I mean, he occupies a rather unique niche in a 20-plus person field, whereas a lot of the others, I would expect to have seen perhaps higher for Bernie Sanders. But others are in a position where they may say, I'm very much in this for my candidate, but what I consider, am I automatically, absolutely, definitely telling you a year from now, it's this candidate or nothing? No, because they're in a field with plenty of other contenders that also have my interest. And if you're in for Biden, it's because of who he is and the odd space that he occupies.
Right. I can't find it exactly at my fingertips, but it's interesting things. 45% of Democratic voters name Biden as having the best chance to defeat Trump, followed by Sanders at 14 and Warren at 12. Oh. But if you ask who would make the best president, regardless of the election, Biden still has an edge.
Okay.
But only with 20% pick Warren and 16% choose Sanders, so a much closer race there. Biden still leads in both categories. And I read somewhere else, and nearly 6 in 10 Democratic-leaning voters, here's where it is, say that they would consider switching to support another candidate or that they still don't have a preference. So more than half of the total Democratic-leaning voters aren't completely and totally firm.
Okay. There's 20 people.
But that accounts for a lot of the non-big three.
Yes.
So where those votes are going to go, should a Bill de Blasio drop out, where his 2 votes are going to go, or whether, what happens to Pete Buttigieg if he doesn't stay or Beto doesn't stay, that remains an open question at this time.
Yes. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll go on.
So with the break coming up, I'm just trying to summarize everything I can before the break in terms of our quick stuff.
There you go.
Right?
Yes.
And by the way, a bunch of retiring Texans. Nice story about that from Christopher Hooks in the New York Times. A wave of GOP House members leaving Congress is a political opportunity for hungry Democrats in Texas.
And I am hungry. But I'm not in Texas. But if I was, I would eat barbecue and vote Democratic.
Yeah, more after the break.
Yes, okay, very good. I think that wraps it up neatly from there. And we'll be back in 2 minutes with more neatness out of the mess, I hope.
More mess out of the neatness.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Almost forgot to come back, but we are here. The music told us that the break was over. So where were we, Greg? Not much happening.
So we were just doing quick takes, and now I'm going to do a little bit longer take. And we're going to talk a little bit about Jeffrey Epstein running Faro and the MIT Media Lab and what's going on over there.
Okay.
Right. And it's a little bit complicated, so I thought it lent itself for after the break. So we would do this in a little bit more organized fashion, if I possibly can.
Oh, well,
which
then
is
I'll just
not
sit here.
Easy.
Okay.
By the way.
Yeah, I can imagine it's troubling. MIT.
Yeah.
KU.
So I went there.
Yes.
But that was a long time ago.
All right.
Right. And so when I was there.
Before Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriends were born.
What's that?
Before Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriends were born.
Yeah. Well.
That long ago, really?
Okay. Twice as long as before.
Oh, I see. Okay. Girlfriends. Captive slaves. Sorry.
So I was there back in the 70s.
Right.
And at the time, there was a relatively well-known fellow, Nicholas Negroponte, who actually came out of the architecture department.
Not Nickleby.
And his original idea is that architecture was tough to teach.
Yes.
So what could you do in terms of putting together a laboratory that meshed architecture, engineering, and computing into a way to do research and teaching?
I don't know.
He was a big proponent at the time. This is back in the 60s of artificial intelligence. And the idea would be that could you use computers to help teach? This is back in the day when stuff like this wasn't happening. I mean, we were still playing Zork by line. You know, you're in a twisty, windy passage, and then you get the next line. There's no graphics. There's no graphic user interface. It was all text. And so he was trying to envision how you could use machines to help with teaching. And this piece summarizes it. It was a laboratory that mixed architecture, engineering, and computing in a new vision of architectural research and teaching. They sought to challenge traditional architectural pedagogy. The Beaux-Arts teaching method exercised residual influence that remains as an incubus that dampens the enthusiasm for any panacea. All right, they already start with like they're using words and what do they mean?
Yeah, right.
Anderson called for the department to look to other fields and collaborations, drawing attention to the promise of new methodologies for problem solving, especially those supported by memory and retrieval systems, that is to say, computers, and manipulative possibilities of the computer. Right? Okay. And it was intentionally multidisciplinary from the beginning. It was located in the Department of Architecture, but half the student researchers came from electrical engineering, which is the computer folks, and encompassed undergraduate and graduate student research.
Yes.
Okay. And the majority of the funding at that time came from defense research, like ARPA, Advanced Research Projects Agency, which was later DARPA, and the Office of Naval Research, and the National Science Foundation. And the whole idea was that you were going to build stuff that people could use in order to better teach, but the core of what they were doing is to do demos and projects. So you had to build something and show it to people.
Like the
it wasn't just an
calculator.
essay.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So this concept undergirded the demo or die ethos of the lab. Then it folded into MIT Media Lab in 1985, well after I was gone. Okay. The choice of the term media referred to convergence and overlap of broadcast, motion pictures, print and publishing, and computers. And this was a $40 million fundraising effort by the original lab director, Nicholas Negroponte, and Jerry Wiesner, who used to be the MIT president. And corporations pledged their pre-commercial research budget into doing this. And so consortiums started, and that's how the funding for the Media Lab originally came out of corporations. It wasn't simply a different department within the school.
Okay.
And it developed, and then they started bringing in designers and fashion people and other non-traditional computer-type people, although those with an interest in it who wanted to interface and do things together. And I have this really interesting list here of top 25 ideas and products that came out of MIT Media Lab.
Okay.
Many of which you know, but didn't know it came from there.
All right.
For example, Amazon Kindle.
All right.
Or the Barnes & Noble Nook, or all of these e-readers. Yeah. They all use electronic ink technology that was developed at the Media Lab. Okay, here's another one maybe you didn't know. Guitar Hero, the game.
Oh, right.
That was developed by a Media Lab spin-off, Harmonix Music Systems, using computers to interface music and your PlayStation. I mean, you get where we're going here? So they do these innovative interfaces that take products like computers and figure out how people could use them and then make them more people-friendly. Computers you can wear, stuff like that.
Oh. Yeah, all right.
Right? Scratch programming languages for kids, Exo Laptop, MPEG structured audio, which you may use if you ever listen to or watch a little video. That came out of there.
All of my things are that.
Right? So you get an idea that actually they did a lot of stuff that you are aware of, and that's how come they have this reputation for innovation.
How do they pronounce GIF?
I think they just write it.
No, the computer does it itself. Okay.
Right. Anyway, so this comes from 25 top ideas and products from the MIT Media Lab. So they're well known, and they have quirky people there, and they sort of take a tech bro attitude toward we're going to be different and we're going to be disruptive and we're going to be,
that can be problematic. Yeah.
Innovative, and we're going to be, the anti people, and we're going to be a little bit different.
But good stuff, not juicero.
But good stuff, right? And so then they still have to raise lots of money in order to try and continue these collaborations. And sometimes they raise this money from organizations, and sometimes they do it from foundations, and sometimes they do it from individuals. And so now you're starting to get into a very high-profile institution, university, with a high-profile center that has a great reputation, and you get somebody in there who's running the place who may or may not have sterling academic credentials, but is a really fast talker, really good with networking, and really good at raising money.
Okay.
Right? Starting to sound familiar here?
Yes.
And so all of these people who are fast talkers, who are really good at networking and really good with raising money, start to get to know each other.
Yeah, that happens.
And one of the interfaces there that happens is between the head of the lab, Media Lab, Joy Ito, and Jeffrey Epstein.
No. Who
has lots of money and is very good at networking, and they move in the same circles. So to be accurate about it, let me give you a letter that MIT President Raphael Reif just sent over the weekend to everybody, because what happened is Ronan Farrow had a piece on September 6th in the New Yorker, I think it was Saturday morning, and a bombshell piece, how an elite university research center concealed its relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, people were starting to get the idea that Jeffrey Epstein was related to the Media Lab, and some folks were already getting upset about this and wanting to have some sort of investigation as to how Jeffrey Epstein's money got in there.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, what was the date on this? This was August 22nd. So a couple of weeks ago, MIT sends out this letter to members of the MIT community. I expect you know that the late Jeffrey Epstein cultivated relationships with and supplied funding to leading researchers at several institutions, including MIT. Here's some background on the gifts MIT received. Over the course of 20 years, MIT received approximately $800,000 via foundations controlled by Jeffrey Epstein. All the gifts went either to the Media Lab or Professor Seth Lloyd. Both Seth and the Media Lab director, Joy Ito, have made public statements apologizing to Jeffrey Epstein's victims and others for judgments made over a series of years. The situation requires a broader and deeper institutional approach, and so they were going to have an internal investigation to see what that happened. And then offered profound and humble apologies on behalf of the MIT administration to Jeffrey Epstein's victims.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So they basically, Epstein got caught sending money here, and they're very embarrassed about it, and they're going to do something about it. But this kind of reads as a mistakes were made kind of thing.
Yes.
So this was August 22nd, but on September 6th, Ronan Farrow publishes this piece, How an Elite University Research Center Concealed Its Relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. New documents show that the MIT Media Lab was aware of Epstein's status as a convicted sex offender and that Epstein directed contributions to the lab far exceeding the amounts MIT has publicly admitted. In fact, the letters from the director, Joy Ito, actually show that they knew that Epstein was on the forbidden list. He was on a don't take money from this donor list that MIT maintains.
Well.
But they took it anyway, and they went out of their way to conceal it, and they wanted it to be anonymous. The effort to conceal the lab's contact with Epstein was so widely known, says Farrow, that some staff in the office of the lab director, Joy Ito, referred to Epstein as Voldemort, or he who must not be named.
Okay.
Right? And so pretty extensive involvement there. And they even talk about the fact that Epstein used to actually bring some of his girls over there.
Yes, I did see that part.
And that was pretty not good.
Yeah, and it was obvious to people who were there what was going on.
Yes, there was a whistleblower named Signe Swenson, former development associate and alumni coordinator at the lab. She resigned in 2016 over this and said the lab's leadership made it explicit even in our earliest conversations that Epstein's donations had to be kept secret. Swenson had seen that Epstein was listed in the university's central donor database as disqualified. I know he was a pedophile and pointed that out, but she stayed there for a while anyway because the director insisted that, he was done with that, and it was just taking the money, but that Epstein wasn't up to anything anymore.
I can understand staying for a while. Like, I haven't done anything wrong here. This is a good job, and I want it. And
Right.
I'm pointing out something that's wrong here. But then, I guess after a while, you just can't take it anymore.
Because,
Sounds
this is
fine
what
to me.
happened. So on the one time he actually comes, and Ito, the director, had informed one of the staff members that Epstein never goes into any room without his 2 female assistants, whom he wanted to bring to the meeting at the Media Lab. So Swenson, the whistleblower, objects to this too, and it was decided the assistants would be allowed to accompany Epstein but would wait outside the meeting room. On the day of the visit, Swenson's distress deepened at the sight of the young women. There were models, Eastern Europeans definitely. Among the lab staff, she said, all of us women made it a point to be super nice to them. We literally had a conversation about how on the off chance they're not there by choice, we could maybe help them.
Yeah, like to slip them a note, blink twice if you're being held captive kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know how they were going to help, but wow.
Even though she resigned, her participation in what she took to be a cover-up of his contributions has weighed heavily on her since. Now, there had been a movement to try to support Ito in saying that, this is terrible, but he made a mistake. He shouldn't resign. There was actually an online petition with some fairly famous names. Lawrence Lessig comes to mind.
That guy is
and
really
then this,
dragging himself through the
This
mud.
report comes out in the morning.
Oh, something from today.
Saturday in the morning.
Saturday morning. Oh, the Ronan Farrow one.
And by the Ronan Farrow piece comes out. And by the
that's what started
afternoon,
it.
Ito had resigned from MIT. He had resigned from board member of the New York Times.
Yes.
And he had resigned from the MacArthur Foundation, the Genius Foundation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good.
Okay. And then I get this memo again after that, about 5 o'clock Saturday evening. Last night, the New Yorker published an article that contains deeply disturbing allegations about the engagement between individuals at the Media Lab and Jeffrey Epstein. Because the accusations in the story are extremely serious, they demand an immediate, thorough, and independent investigation. Remember, the previous one was going to be an internal investigation. So this morning, I asked MIT's general counsel to engage a prominent law firm to design and conduct this process. I expect the firm to conduct this review as swiftly as possible, yada, yada. The acceptance of the Epstein gifts involved a mistake of judgment. We're actively assessing how best to improve our policies, processes, and procedures, yada, yada, yada. So that's how it stands at the moment. So very embarrassing. But, part of the deal is, how do you get the money for individual departments or units within a department that are semi-independent? Now, sometimes you just spin them off. Back in the 70s when I was there, National Magnet Lab and Draper Labs and other defense-related labs that were associated with MIT actually got spun off because there were student protests over the Vietnam War, and it was just felt better for everybody that they disassociate. Mm-hmm. And whether or not the MIT Media Lab can survive this remains to be seen. But again, I wanted to start by giving you a list of some of the products that they've made, so at least you knew who they were and what they do. Everybody who's reading the story says, I get the Epstein part. I don't get what MIT Media Lab does.
Yeah, well, who would without an explanation?
Right.
No reason to know.
And they don't explain it really well themselves, because when you go back and look at the website, it's all, newspeak.
Yeah, but okay, by the products, I think that makes some sense.
But
okay, that
products,
sounds important.
That's what it says in the Bible, right? By the products you shall know them.
Exactly, right. And then buy the products with a U.
Yeah.
When you're done.
And I think the Bible is Consumer Reports I'm referring to here.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So anyway, there you have it. So I'm trying to summarize a relatively difficult circumstance and complicated circumstance, but that's what's going on there, and it's in the news, made the front page in the New York Times, and lots of people have heard about it.
Now, the New York Times,
since it happened over the weekend, you may just be hearing about it this morning.
It's possible. I mean, a lot of people did hear about it over the weekend. Of course, they were just minding their own business, and Jeffrey Epstein showed up on their lap again. But it poses some interesting questions. Obviously, they make some innovative and interesting, or they are drivers behind interesting and innovative products that everybody is glad to have. And the question of whether they can survive is a serious one. Certainly, you got to start by saying, all right, well, the person who solicited these donations has got to go, right? It may even be the case that they have difficulty landing on their feet. Not entirely sure, but usually people like that do. but I don't know whether they should. But underlying it all is I assume that there's a number of people who are just who are students at MIT who've been working on a project that they've been on for years that they thought was going to make their careers, and you can't just flush it all down the toilet just because one guy is soliciting money from, or even 10 are soliciting money from Jeffrey Epstein. You do what you can to deal with those people, but
it's certainly not unusual for junior members of the department or division to be shielded from the money-raising part by the very senior people.
True.
But the bigger issue there is what kind of institutional controls do they have, and do entities like this, which are famous and well-known, somehow have their own rules.
Yes,
and you can't have your own rules. This is what happens when you have your own rules.
Yeah, well, that's why, I mean, I assume a lot of people are going to be at least partially satisfied by purging people who had personal roles in all of this. I guess there's a question about did you excise all of this cancer or not? And I couldn't tell you that word's going to have to come from inside.
As you well know, because we talk about this on the show all the time. There's two parts to this. Who were the individuals that were involved, and what was the process that allowed it to happen?
Yeah.
And you can purge the individuals, but if you don't change the process, it's just going to happen again.
True. And I mean, even if you do, I mean, they had a banned individuals list. That sounds like somebody at one point. How do you even get to having that?
How do you ignore it?
Right. So now there's going to have to be a process for how to use the process.
Yeah.
All right.
Pretty much.
Well, luckily they're all
that's what
artificial
happens.
intelligence
Humans
people.
are being what they are, and somebody dangles a lot of money in their face, and they're going to take it.
Now,
right?
I guess
you
they could
got to have
design a
processes
computer.
in the place that prevent that. You just have to.
They'll put their faith in AI and say there's a computer program that could do this.
Yeah, we'll have an algorithm for that.
Yeah, and then it'll turn out that the guy who wrote the
we'll
code
we'll sell it back to the school.
an undesirable. Yeah, right. So there's a backdoor in it for his money later on. Who knows? But you mentioned also, by the way, that Ito was a board member of the New York Times.
Yes,
there's no real reason why that should
written
happen.
Less than scathingly about some things involving Epstein.
Yeah, and apparently there are whistleblowers involved in this who insist that they took this story to the New York Times as well as other outlets. And
Zena Jarian in particular, but I think there's some other names that are named that this isn't like the first time we heard this. But, as they say in the business, it is not a good thing for Ronan Farrow to be writing a story about you.
No, if that's happening, resign from whatever you're doing. Get out. Here's an interesting question. I mean, I think it has a real answer, but as Bob will speak, who's now going as the Sharpie of Truth, by the way, on Twitter, asks, and Abby can answer if she knows, if MIT Media Lab develops all these amazing products, why are they so desperate for money? Of course, it's not quite that easy, but it's a good question. And it may very well be that they can replace the source very easily with somebody who's, I don't know, not a pedophile, but
could be.
It takes a lot of money to make those amazing products.
My doorbell out.
Okay. Maybe they could design you a new doorbell that will not bark every time. Although, if we could hear the doorbell, that would be helpful in signaling what's going to happen here. Let's see. And another observation on the subject here from Thelonious08 here, who says MIT took anonymous donations to fund excellent research. Who was hurt? How would the world be better if they had rejected those donations? With a hashtag, this is a phony scandal. I don't know if I'd go that far. But
that's interesting because that's exactly what Lawrence Lessig writes. In fact, he makes the point
shying away from it just based on that. Yes.
That a lot of people donate money in order to get their names on things and to whitewash.
That is
who
true.
They are.
That is a good
Carnegies and the Koch brothers and folks like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you take their money anonymously, they can't use the prestige to whitewash themselves.
Except that they can.
But they can, and they do it in a little bit more insidious way.
Yeah.
And that is that they get themselves invited to the lab, and then they network, and then they network other people, and then they tell people that they themselves are very cool and wonderful because look at the people at the MIT lab that we know, and you should come and you should do this and that with me. And the next thing you know, even though it's indirect, they're using the connection to prop themselves up. So no, it's not harmless at all.
That's a good explanation for it. I mean, why were the girls there? Why?
Why do people think that Jeffrey Epstein was somebody to know? It isn't necessarily because they were getting massages from his girls, although that's the accusation made against some people,
That's
like
not
Alan Dershowitz. But no, it's because Epstein was using the connections in order to meet other people.
Yeah, it's a little less
and
than
then
anonymous,
using that
I'll say.
to further his own reputation. So he doesn't have to have his name on a building in order to get benefit from it. And if you are associated knowing that the guy's a pedophile, that you're doing this, how in that sense is it? I mean, he would bring his girls to the lab. How is that okay?
Yeah.
I mean, in what world is that okay? Of course it's not harmless.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make much sense to me to pretend that it's not a scandal. You can decide that it's a different kind of scandal. I don't know anybody is really coming to this conclusion, like, oh, everything coming out of the MIT Media Lab is tainted forever. I don't think that's even the purveyors of the scandal label are saying that's what's supposed to come out of
There's
this.
two aspects of it. Mike Musson correctly points out, for example, that the issue and bigger scandal is, where do the institutions get their money?
Yeah.
And is donation money always acceptable? When is it questionable? When is it the Mellons and the Carnegies, trying to whitewash their own reputations by giving money and then getting their names on buildings?
Yeah.
Do you take those names down? What if Trump gave $1 billion prior to running for president? Would you have taken it?
That would be amazing. He never
and
would
would
do
you take
that,
it down?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole method of fundraising through private investment into universities in and of itself, is potentially tainted, and that's part of this whole thing.
Yes,
People
and it
don't wanna
always
pay for
can
things.
be.
And if you're going to pay for it, and you're not going to do it through taxpayer money, because taxpayers don't want to, quote, pay for these things, then you're going to introduce corruption.
Yes, and everybody's got it, and I mean, I don't know. I'm not certain exactly what's motivating it, but certainly you're not off the hook if you're not from MIT. I guarantee you, wherever you went to college, if you're a college graduate or even attended at any point, the institution where you attended classes has got money that you would disapprove of as a progressive. I've spent plenty of time discussing right-wing philanthropy and how much money they're parking in educational institutions. And you might think that it's not the case, but you're wrong, and it is. But, most of them are not involved in the things that Epstein is involved in. And bottom line is, MIT's own process said, we're not allowed to take money from this person, and they bent the rules and did it. And they should have to answer for that. Why did I leave it entirely up to MIT? Why did you decide you weren't allowed to take his money? And then why did you take it? Just as an internal problem, it's fireable.
So a lot there. But yeah, it's a scandal. It's a big scandal. And of course, for those in the MIT community who, were raised with the ethos that this is an egalitarian meritocracy, this is bad.
Yeah. Now, I'm also of the opinion that the work there can go on, and that the people who are developing products and ideas there may very well be entirely blameless at some level for all of this, and hopefully that excising the top people who facilitate things like hush-hush visits by
this is
banned
more
person,
an administration
you're out.
problem than it is a researcher problem.
Sounds like it.
It's not like they were caught developing death rays.
True, right? But
Or
that
wearable
might even be
death rays.
acceptable there. Well, that's the real problem. How do you wash it?
That you could conceal in your, little Spidey wristband there.
Yeah, right. Or things that fire little metal projectiles at 2 a second, and It's not like
but
they're
actually,
developing
web spinners are exactly the kind of thing they might have invented here. But the problem
We
is
don't need
administration and the whole way that administration does stuff. So I've taken up your entire hour. I've taken your second half hour with that. I just
That's
thought it
all
was
right
an
with me.
important story. I
It
disagree
is.
with my friend Thelonious. I think it's an actually big story, and I just wanted to try to make it discernible. I may not have gotten every detail correct. It's a very
almost certainly
complicated
not.
story.
Not in half an hour.
But that's basically what's
However,
going on.
I will give you an opportunity to exit on a conciliatory note and meet him in the middle here. He is mentioning, now we're misusing the word pedophile, and that's true. He's a something else, and the word is...
He's an pedophile, and there's another thing. Thank you for bringing that up, because I would basically classify you as incorrect in both comments you made today. If you read the article from Ronan Farrow, where pedophile is used frequently, all the other articles are using pedophile frequently. This is an argument you've lost. You're technically correct, and nobody is going to use the proper terms.
No one
Get
even
over
knows
it. He's a pedophile. So is Roy Moore. Done.
Okay.
Not worth discussing anymore.
I am willing to, we'll acknowledge the point. There is another word out there. I don't know it. And the reason is no one uses it. Sorry.
Right. No one uses it and no one knows it. And so if you're trying to communicate, you're going to use terms that people understand.
I guess that's true.
Right? Because after all, Jeffrey Epstein was the owner of Pedophile Island.
That's true, too. They did call it that. And hardly anybody stopped the boat captains and said,
that's what it is.
No, it's something else island. Okay. Well, all right. We're expanding the definition, if that's what it takes. I'm drawing around with a Sharpie into a different age group to include them in pedophilia.
Now, if you're a technical expert and you're in court, then you want to use the proper term. If you're a psychiatrist, you want to use the proper term. Everybody else, for the purpose of discussing things and communicating with your fellow human beings, he's a pedophile.
That's the way that chip is going to fall. Okay. I'm okay with it, and it probably doesn't even mean that people who are doing important work at MIT are going to have to stop, so I suppose it's okay. Who's hurt? We might use his phrasing. Who's hurt by using the wrong word in this case? I don't know. Nobody I care about. Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. That's a tough topic, and we'll be back on this and other tough topics on Wednesday.
Yes, with North Carolina 9 under our belt.
Oh, right. My goodness. All right. See you next time. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And just to get this out of the way, you're all wrong about everything. So don't worry about it. It doesn't make any difference, and no one's going to know. No one's going to be able to single you out for being any wronger than any of the rest of us, because we're all wrong about everything, and it's okay. But I can certainly see where, and I would certainly agree, that if the aim of all this is to say that the MIT Media Lab has to close and all projects it ever produced or might ever produce are unworthy from here on in, no, that's not the aim of the scandal. Now, I suppose there could be some people who have that as an aim. They would be, I think, going too far in these things. Whereas, on the other hand, I suppose, just as long as we're on this topic, if you wanted to close down Liberty University as scandal-ridden through and through, I think you might be able to get away with that one. Switching subjects briefly, and still not on any of the things that I would have considered top 5 screamer stories, even as the show began. I don't know. We do stream of consciousness here. A story that was in the, shall we say, it's in the hopper because we're here in the United States. If we were in England, we could say that it was in the dispatch box, but it really wouldn't be in there. But I guess figuratively so. This provided by Greg, but also already in my own queue, if you will, and I am not talking about the conspiracy theory cues. The story of the latest entry from Politico in the Jerry Falwell Jr.? Is he the junior or the third? I don't even remember anymore. This on top of I gave $2 million to the pool boy and another $2 million to, like, I don't remember who the other person was, what other personal service the guy was providing. Apparently this is systemic. Is that right? Systemic, not systematic. System-wide. Systemic. Do I have it right? Here's the story from Politico, which has a little thing on top here. Church and state. I guess they have a whole church and state tag I didn't even know about. Someone's got to tell the freaking truth. It sounds like they're dealing with the same sort of thing here as in MIT, except I think it's a lot less widespread. And I think, they might be able to excise the problem by excising Falwell from the institution. The problem is that the whole thing is, the whole Liberty University project is intimately and I think inextricably bound up with the Falwell family. And that's one of the problems with a church operation, period. But okay, someone's got to tell the freaking truth. Jerry Falwell's aides break their silence. More than 24 current and former Liberty University officials describe a culture of fear and self-dealing at the largest Christian college in the world. Now, if you were describing a culture of fear and self-dealing at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, you'd have a different story. That's how I'll differentiate between these two. The writer here, Brandon Ambrosino, by the way, living in Delaware. It says right here in the intro here, there's a little note on it. Brandon Ambrosino is a writer living in Delaware. His articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Atlantic, and the BBC, among others. That's, I guess, their way of justifying how Brandon Ambrosino is in the pages of Politico without being a known hack. Well, so, okay. This is how it's happening. At Liberty University, all anyone can talk about is Jerry Falwell Jr. There's the answer. Just not in public. When he does stupid stuff, people will mention it to others they consider confidants and not keep it totally secret. A trusted advisor to Falwell, the school's president and chancellor, told me, but they won't rat him out. And that's the big problem. He's the president and chancellor and has his hands in everything. You can't escape the taint of what he's up to. And it may involve some taint. I'm just saying. It's possibly true. That's beginning to change. I wish that part would begin to change. And please pass the Purell before I do the rest of this story. Over the past year, Falwell, a prominent evangelical leader, this, by the way, despite the fact that he is not a minister, and he keeps using the fact that he's not a minister to excuse himself from scandal when it's discovered, well, I'm not a minister, so it's not a scandal for me. Well, no, it's a scandal for you. You're supposed to be a moral person, even if you're not involved in your family business at all. You're supposed to be better than this. Because, humans are better than animals, and I don't know. If there's any animals listening to the show, I apologize. I'm old-fashioned. Anyway, over the past year, Falwell, a prominent evangelical leader for no reason, and supporter of President Donald Trump, maybe for some reason, has come under increasing scrutiny. And again, by the way, I'll just say to Jerry Falwell, by way of advice, anything Donald Trump touches turns to crap. Don't get near him. But I don't really care whether you're saved or not, in either sense. News outlets have reported on business deals by Liberty University benefiting Falwell's friends. Trump's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen, claimed that he had helped Falwell clean up racy personal photographs. Based on scores of new interviews and documents obtained for this article, concerns about Falwell's behavior go well beyond that, and it's causing longtime loyal Liberty University officials to rapidly lose faith in him. And here we have a scandal wide enough, as I said, to start affecting things like just regular people who are walking around with Liberty University degrees. Quite honestly, they were suspect to begin with, but they're not in a place where they're going to be able to recover. You're walking around with an MIT degree, right? Really, there's nothing, here I'll agree with people who are minimizing the concerns. Here I will say, I really don't feel like there's anything about the Media Lab story, even taken at its worst possible light, that taints the value of an MIT degree. Liberty University never really had that luxury. It was always suspect, but I thought it was beginning to sort of mainstream itself, and there's still probably not very many people who question credentialing Liberty University outright, though maybe they should. But they just it's ridiculous to compare the reputations of Liberty University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's just not in the same universe, and they were in no position, Liberty, to take this kind of damage. But what would Jerry Falwell Jr. care? He's in it for the money. More than 24 current and former before I even go on, I did skim a little of this article. When I say he's in it for the money, I mean a lot of them are in it for the money, and a lot of people involved in running Liberty University are in it for the money, and I mean it when I say it gets down to the level of your degree might be worth a whole lot less, despite the fact that you had nothing to do with the fundraising and you had nothing to do with the way the place is being run, whatever. You know, I forgive you all of that, but you're in trouble. You have a degree that's going to sink you, and you should be suing Falwell and his lieutenants over it, quite honestly, if you had the wherewithal to do that, which you don't. Possibly in part because you're a graduate of Liberty University, to be honest, but all right. More than 24 current and former high-ranking Liberty University officials and close associates of Falwell spoke to me, the writer here, not me, or provided documents for this article, opening up for the first time at an institution so intimately associated with the Falwell family, and that's the problem, about what they've experienced and why they don't think he's the right man to lead Liberty University or serve as a figurehead in the Christian conservative movement. That's big. Now that's a scandal. In interviews over the past 8 months, they depicted how Falwell and his wife Becky consolidated power at Liberty University, and how Falwell presides over a culture of self-dealing, like Trump, directing university resources into projects and real estate deals in which his friends and family have stood to make personal and financial gains, like Trump, this time with the United States government. Which might eventually get us to our next story. Among the previously unreported revelations are Falwell's decision to hire his son, Trey's, so I knew there was a third out there, Trey's company to manage a shopping center owned by the university. Why should they own it? Investment, whatever, but okay. Falwell's advocacy for loans given by the university to his friends and pool boys, and Falwell's awarding university contracts to businesses owned by his friends and pool boys and others. And personal trainers. That was the other one. We're not a school. This is the damning part. And here's why you have a degree that's not worth anything anymore, Liberty University grads. And there are a lot of them, by the way, from the law school, sitting at the lower levels of the Department of Justice, in some cases embedded, and in places where we're not going to be able to root them out for many, many years. Not just Trumpsters, but Bush appointees as well. They were actually the innovators in this plan, just to sort of tie things to larger problems, larger systemic problems on the government side of things. Liberty University is a huge source of radical, right-wing, lunatic, quote-unquote lawyers who are holding on to degrees that purport to be JDs, and so therefore are quote-unquote qualified for jobs in the Department of Justice. And once again, we wrote all these laws about how you can and can't dismiss people from government service, and how they're protected from partisan influence. But we weren't expecting people to use the fact that they were going to be protected from partisan influence to put the most partisan people in there. They were not supposed to be in there in the first place according to the same laws, but they broke those laws to put partisan people in these positions, and a law-abiding Democratic successor to Trump, or Bush, don't forget that's where it started, will find it very difficult to remove those people from places they ought not properly to have been allowed in the first place because they're abiding by the law. Anyway, back to this story. This is why your degree is in trouble. We're not a school. Now, that's a bad thing to say about a school, right? I have a degree from this school. No, you don't. We're not a school. Oh, I might not have a degree. Here's the quote. "We're not a school. We're a real estate hedge fund," said a senior university official with inside knowledge of Liberty's finances. "We're not educating." That is also a thing you don't want to have said about your school. "We're not educating. We're buying real estate every year and taking students' money to do it." The degree you have from Liberty University is a non-privileged and non-dividend bearing share in Jerry Falwell Jr.'s real estate hedge fund. Money goes in, but it doesn't come out for you. You're an idiot. You thought you were buying an education and a degree, but it turns out that what it was all about was taking your tuition money to invest in real estate for Jerry Falwell Jr. How do you feel about that? We're not a school. We're a real estate hedge fund. We're not educating. We're buying real estate every year and taking students' money to do it. Liberty employees detailed other instances of Falwell's behavior that they see as falling short of the standard of conduct they expect from conservative Christian leaders. From partying at nightclubs to graphically discussing his sex life with employees to electioneering that makes uneasy even those who fondly remember the heyday of the late Reverend Jerry Falwell Sr., the school's founder and Falwell Jr.'s father, and his moral majority. Well, okay, it's all out of keeping with the moral majority. But again, he excuses all of this by saying, I'm not a minister, so I can talk about partying at nightclubs and graphically discussing my sex life. Nah, not as the head of Liberty University, you can't. In January, the Wall Street Journal reported that in the run-up to Trump's presidential campaign, Cohen hired John Gauger, I don't know how he would say it, Gauger, Gauger or Gauger, I guess, I don't know. Let's say Gauger, John Gauger, a Liberty University employee who runs a private consulting firm. So Cohen hires Gauger, who runs a private consulting firm but also works at Liberty University, to manipulate online polls in Trump's favor. No wonder there's the says who. Right? Remember when he was disputing that there were any polls that didn't show Trump in the lead? I'm paying people good money to manipulate these polls. I guess that was on his mind. Not previously reported is the fact that according to a half dozen high-level Liberty University sources, when Gauger, traveled to New York to collect payment from Cohen, he was joined by Trey Falwell, a vice president at Liberty. During that trip, Trey posted a now-deleted photo to Instagram of around $12,000 in cash spread on a hotel bed, raising questions about his idiocy, raising questions about his knowledge of Gauger's poll rigging work. Trey did not respond to requests for comment, but they should just arrest him and see if they can get comment out of him that way. Wow. So how do you like that? Says who? All the polls are in our favor. I paid $12,000 in cash to Gauger and Trey Falwell to make sure that it happened. How they did it, I have no idea. But if they used a media lab, we have a problem. Jerry Falwell Jr. responded to more than 24 written questions, defending his actions and criticizing the reporting of this article. I fear that the true information I am sharing in good faith will simply not make any difference and will only result in more questions, Falwell said. He declined to answer subsequent questions. The string of news articles over the past several months has had a minimal effect on Falwell's leadership of Liberty University. As the namesake of the school's founder, Falwell has never had his position seriously challenged. Liberty is thriving financially. Its enrollment has surged past 110,000 students, the vast majority of whom are enrolled online, super shady, and across its campus in the foothills of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. The hum of backhoes and bulldozers is omnipresent as construction crews work to keep pace with the university's swelling ambitions. But these new revelations speak to rising discontent with Falwell's stewardship. The people interviewed for this article include members of Liberty's Board of Trustees, senior university officials, and rank-and-file staff members who work closely with Falwell. They are reluctant to speak out. There's no organized open dissent to Falwell on campus, but they said they see it as necessary to save Liberty University. They're right. And the values it once stood for. They say they believe in the Christian tradition and in the conservative politics at the heart of Liberty's mission. Many knew Jerry Falwell Sr. and remember him with clear affection. The day that man died was the day I lost a father, one current university official said. All count themselves as conservatives. Many are strong supporters of Trump. I am a graduate of Liberty University, and my time there overlapped with the tenures of both Falwell Sr. and his son. Over the course of my years of reporting on the university, the Falwells have granted me considerable access. This is the actual writer here, including sit-down interviews in the office with both Falwell Jr. and his brother, the Reverend Jonathan Falwell. He's a minister, I guess, who leads Thomas Road Baptist Church. I've written candidly about my time there as a student, reported about political divisions on campus and revealed that Trey co-owns a gay-friendly hostel in Miami. Remember, that was the first of the scandal stories we read about this guy. Members of the Liberty University community are generally reluctant to go on the record. The school uses non-disclosure agreements to prohibit many university employees or board members from openly discussing what they've seen Falwell do. And here's a quote here included parenthetically. All trustees sign a confidentiality agreement that does not expire at the close of board service. Liberty's attorney told board members in an email that was sent earlier this month after the school received inquiries from reporters on some of the issues outlined in this article. Tenure and its protections are not available to Liberty faculty members outside the law school. If you teach or work at Liberty, you must get approval from Falwell's office before you speak to the media. Talk to reporters without his approval or publicly criticize him, even obliquely, and you could lose your job. If you're a board member and do the same, you could get forced out, even if you have unimpeachable credentials in the Christian conservative movement. It's a dictatorship. One current high-level employee of the school said, nobody craps at the university without Jerry's approval. Which, quite honestly, I think is a waste of Jerry's time, but if that's what he's into, what can you do? Who am I to criticize? I'm going to do it anyway. Everybody is scared for their life. Everybody walks around in fear, said a current university employee who agreed to speak for this article only after purchasing a burner phone, fearing that Falwell was monitoring their communications. The fear is not limited to Liberty's campus. Several people who lack any tie to Liberty but live in the school's hometown of Lynchburg, Virginia, refused to go on the record for this story, fearing Falwell would take revenge upon them and their families. Fear is probably his most powerful weapon, a former senior university official said, but even those who fear have their breaking points. Now, I guess I would say fear is maybe his most powerful weapon in this guy's mind, but really, honestly, of course, it's money. He's just using the money to create the fear. Like, I fear that he may find a way to punish me, even though all I do is I disagree with him and I just live in the same town as the school. Well, I fear that he may use his money to take it out on me. I'm going to close that guy's business. Everybody has to avoid it, or I'm going to I'll buy the property around his business for the school and somehow sabotage your business, or tear down the buildings nearby, or fill, I don't know, he may just move porn stores in there or whatever. You see what I'm getting at is they fear his ability to use his money to ruin them. And of course, that money is being, at this point, stolen from students in exchange for what amount to phony or at least diplomas of deteriorating value, because he's sucking all the money and all the value out of them by using the money not to improve the quality of the education they're getting, but to enrich himself and his friends. This is a very long story and could easily take the rest of the day. I don't think I want to let it do that. Although I'd very much like to share all of this story with you. It's not the most impactful one out there. But it made a decent segue, I think, given that we were talking about the MIT story, and a segue into self-dealing, which gives us a chance to move on to, let's say, the next story here. Oh, by the way, before I do, though, one more comment from Mike Musson. Epstein, another Epstein comment. Epstein wasn't widely known by the public until Trump picked Acosta. That could be true. We all knew him, of course, because of the Trump connection without Acosta. But anyway, now this is an MIT scandal. The Trump collusion scandal isn't the only one with amazingly wide-ranging connections. Well, that's true. That was all that Epstein was about, was, the connections game, as Greg was pointing out, and that's part of what makes being connected to him so troublesome, is he was always hoping that his connections would save him, and if you're one of his connections, even if you thought you were doing A, you were in fact doing additional work for him. B, you were collecting money for the MIT Media Lab, but you were also whitewashing his reputation even if he had to do this quote-unquote anonymously. And by the way, if he donated it anonymously, then what's he doing getting VIP tours of the place? It's not anonymous. They know exactly who gave the money, and they're giving him all the treatment he wanted. It may not be that he was interested in whitewashing his reputation at that point, but whatever it is that has value to him is what ought to be denied to him. And, if he places personal value on being able to take personal tours of the lab with his slaves in tow, then that's what you ought to be in the business of denying him. Okay. So let's say we move on from there we got to jump back into Pocket and find our articles on the next stage of our stream of consciousness, the self-dealing problem. We'll run this one backwards because it'll be easier to find our articles working backwards, where we now stand this morning, going back to Politico again, unfortunately, thanks to Natasha Bertrand and Brian Bender, is where Greg noted we were. The Air Force now set to probe the Trump resort stays. Stopovers at Scotland Airport, that would be the Prestwick Airport, have tripled since 2015, and overnight stays in the area are up fivefold. So the numbers are pretty damning. Underlying the whole story, just on the assumption that you've all heard it by now, because it's weekend news and it was Trump news and it was pretty high profile, and people spent the weekend correctly pointing out this is just straight up corruption of the worst and most naked sort. And a huge violation of the Emoluments Clause, and every kind of corruption that the Emoluments Clause is designed to prevent is involved here. Someone who, quote-unquote, wins the presidency, and that's a question all by itself. But somebody who is declared to have won the presidency takes upon themselves all the trappings of all sorts of power, and he's been using it for private gain very, very explicitly. Long story of this short, in case you haven't heard the outlines of the story. Trump owns the golf course in Scotland, Turnberry, and, it's not in the middle of the action, as you might say, and even by Scottish standards. And it is apparently very largely dependent on the ability of rich globe-trotting golfers to fly into a conveniently located airport, Prestwick, and get to the resort pretty quickly. You can fly to Glasgow Airport, which is not that much further away, but for the jet set type that would show up at Turnberry to play, simply because it's Turnberry. I mean, before Trump owned it, it was a known and prestigious destination. But maybe you even want to go there simply because Trump owns it. You're a rich Trumpster, whatever it is. The way to do this is take your private jet and land it at Prestwick, and then make the quick-ish run to the course. I mean, if you're going there to stay at the course, it's not close. It's not next door or anything, but it's a relatively quick dash. The problem is it's not closer to Prestwick Airport if you're looking for cheap-ish accommodations for whatever reason and not there to spend money at a Trump resort. There's other places closer to stay and be safe and comfortable for much less money. That's at the heart of the scandal. So what he's doing, of course, is the maintenance of the airport is very important to bringing in big spenders to play and stay at Turnberry. But Prestwick Airport otherwise is losing business hand over fist. It's just not a centrally located place, and the passenger traffic there, absent Turnberry, or even with Turnberry, quite honestly, wasn't keeping the place open, and it's owned by the Scottish government, and they're watching their pounds, and I was going to say dollars, and so apparently this is a candidate for closure. Otherwise, if it closes, the big spenders don't want to be flying into the big-time commercial airport of Glasgow and making the longer trip and dealing with the bigger crowds, et cetera, even though you can still land your general aviation private planes there, whatever. So it was very important to Turnberry's fortune that Prestwick stay open, and that's where the trouble begins. Of course, most of you know the rest of the story. We'll be right back to tell it to those of you who don't in 2 minutes. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue on here and give you the, this is the latest of the reporting, the written reporting on the Air Force story. When we left off, we were just saying that, outlining the fact that, look, Turnberry, the resort, was also losing money. I hadn't said that yet, but Turnberry was dependent on this Prestwick Airport to bring in the big spenders. The Prestwick Airport was losing money, and the Scottish government was ready to close it, or considering closing it. Turnberry was losing money, and still is losing money, and the only way Trump saw clear to making it profitable or keeping it alive was, because he doesn't have the piles of cash that he claims to have, to just simply subsidize the thing as a prestige property, was to keep this Prestwick Airport up and running. So Prestwick Airport, as it turns out, has been a little side project for Donald Trump for some time. As a matter of fact, over the weekend, somewhere, and I hope I tucked it away, I saw, and there's an awful lot to sort through here in order to find it. Brian Beutler, as you know, every show has to include a Brian Beutler mention, had a tweet in which he compiled, please open it up, early tweets from pre-election. And in fact, in some cases, I think even before he was a declared candidate, Donald Trump tweeting about his interest in making sure Prestwick Airport survives. Brian tweeted this out with just the comment, I mean, come on. And he's got 3 tweets here, only 2 of which I think he included the date in the screenshot. March 30th, 2015, Donald Trump tweeting out the story from the Daily Record, which is entitled Donald Trump in Talks with Ryanair, the Irish airline, right? Ryanair to bring flights back to Prestwick. Why? Right? And then he includes, a quote from the article which misattributes to him tycoon status. U.S. tycoon Donald Trump in talks with Ryanair to bring more flights back to Prestwick Airport. 2015. Why? Who cares, right? Donald Trump pledges to make Prestwick Airport, quote, really successful. This from a Scottish TV news STV News tweet from November 14th, 2014. A picture of himself standing in the hangar before the Trump private aircraft with the big Trump name in gold letters behind him, as he loves to do. Why, in 2014, is he so interested in making Prestwick Airport in Scotland so successful? Third tweet, I don't know if it's from the same time frame, because it says he discusses November 14th, so maybe this too from 2014. Donald Trump's own tweet, press conference at Glasgow Prestwick Airport this Friday, November 14th at 11 a.m. with Donald J. Trump and Mr. Ian Cochrane, who becomes a prominent figure in all of this at some point. Yes? And there's a little graphic that comes along with it. Trump organization graphic and Prestwick's logo here. Please join us for a press conference, yada, yada. What's this all about? Why is Donald Trump so interested in 2014, 2015 in saving an airport in Scotland? He's not the president of the United States yet. He's not the president of Scotland, certainly. He's got nothing to do with the place except he's got business there. But in 2014, 2015, he's pretty much entitled to do whatever the hell he wants to try and save his businesses, right? It's once he becomes president of the United States that things get called into question. And it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do to say, all right, I'm going to talk to Ryanair about bringing more flights back to Prestwick Airport. Why should they do that? I don't know. I'll come up with some reasons why it would be a win-win for them to do it. But if they do, then Prestwick Airport makes more money. Prestwick Airport makes more money. They stay open. They stay open. I make more money because they're available to me to tell high rollers, you want to play Turnberry, fly your jet into Prestwick. It's super easy. That's all well and good. It's not working is the problem. And so, it's not working is one problem. The next problem is he's president of the United States, purportedly. Everything's purported with him. I thought I was going to spend the whole show on that, but I'm not going to. Which gives him the opportunity to do dumb stuff. Close on that one. Like use his status as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States to say, why don't we land Air Force jets like all the time, constantly, for no particular reason, at Prestwick Airport and have the U.S. Air Force planes stationed in Europe or in transit back and forth from Europe buy their fuel there. As a matter of fact, because it's a big part of the business of an airport, we'll sell you jet fuel. So let's land enormous planes that load up on fuel, that carry huge tanks full of fuel, fill up at Prestwick Airport. You know how they tell you, you go to a restaurant, order dinner, whatever, but they really make money on the drinks from the bar because they can really upcharge a lot on those, right? So people who waited tables will tell you the real money is in the drinks. Well, the money is not in the passenger transit fees or landing and departure fees. The money, I guess, is in jet fuel sales, or at least part of it is. And that's a good way to boost the bottom line of the airport, which he wanted to do because keeping it open was important to boosting the bottom line of his stupid Turnberry Golf Club. So what are you going to do? Well, we have jets flying back all the time from the Air Force. We'll make them all fill up at Prestwick Airport. And then it just became exaggerated, like stupid. Oh, what's the biggest jet we've got? Let's send these gigantic cargo planes with their enormous fuel tanks to stop over at Prestwick and fill up there. Not Glasgow, not, don't fly to London even if you're on your way to London. Stop at Prestwick, fill up, and then hop down to London. Worse, how can we make it even dumber? Let's send the gigantic in-flight refueling planes that refuel our jets and other aircraft in flight so that they don't have to stop in case they're flying a combat mission. They don't have to stop at Prestwick and fill up. But now you're talking about sending over gigantic planes that have huge fuel tanks themselves anyway, but are also carrying nothing but huge fuel tanks, flying fuel tanks to refill other planes. I mean, it got absurd. And it was all to boost the bottom line of this stupid airport, which I'm sure it's a nice airport and the people who work there are fantastic. But it was all done to boost the bottom line of his resort. Now, okay, so that's too oblique, right? I'm not making enough money to do it that way. So on top of all this, okay, if I order you as purported president of the United States to fly your stupid, gigantic flying tanker from the Air Force to land at Prestwick and fill up your own tanks and the giant fuel tank that you use to refuel everybody else at Prestwick, you're going to want to take a stopover. You're going to want to rest. You need a time off between that flight and your next one. Let's say I order you to stay at a hotel nearby. And let's say I own a hotel nearby and you have to stay there. So here he is, again, Longish story, relatively still long, but shorter than the whole story. Now the Air Force personnel and others have to go stay at Trump resorts and pay. I mean, they're paying out the Air Force's money. It's not out of pocket. But the Air Force is also now funneling money directly back to Trump. Some of it goes to Prestwick to help his friends, the bulk of it, I guess. And then, okay, a couple more bucks in my pocket because you all have to stay at Turnberry. And I thought one of the more annoying aspects of the Turnberry thing was that he's sending Air Force personnel there and other government personnel to stay there so that he makes money off of their expensing the rooms. But these people are government employees and they've got a per diem allowance for food and drink while they're traveling. And because we're supposedly watching our bottom line because we're concerned with the debt and the deficit and we don't want to waste taxpayer money and blah, 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 the per diem is not super generous. In fact, as it turns out, it's not generous enough to cover food and drink at the Trump Turnberry Resort where you're forced to stay. So you got to either go out somewhere else to eat and drink, or can you imagine? I guess the real thing is, the real tragedy of all of it is, I love the troops. I support the troops. I love our military. He won't even comp them a drink where he's forcing him to stay. The filthy bastard wouldn't even give him a free drink. Our military, our boys in uniform, our men and women in uniform, blah, blah. I support the troops. Wouldn't even, it's not so much as a free Coke from the fountain, or half price meals or anything like that. Now, if he's going to stick it to him, he's going to stick it to the government. But if you can't pay the cost of food and drink out of pocket, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm going to take the money for the hotel and screw you. You go fend for yourself because I support you so much. Can you imagine this? This is really amazing. At this point, I think that's the long story compressed into disorganized short form. Jack Ox shares with me Digby's article for Salon about this and more, which I think perhaps would be best to turn to for more organized thoughts about corruption. The title being Mandatory Stops at Trump Resorts are the tip of the iceberg. This president has been wetting his beak, to use the expression, all along. So, the caption for the photo of the rather expansive Donald Trump here is we're starting to see the scale of Trump's personal corruption, and it's massive. And I'm sure no reference to seeing the scale of Trump's personal waistline, which is also massive in this photo, but what can you do? Anyway, that's not the focus of things. So, President Trump had a very normal weekend. Digby begins and says he tweeted repeatedly about his mistake in telling Alabama it was in the path of Hurricane Dorian, insisting that it wasn't a mistake at all. The controversy grew into something quite serious when it became obvious Trump was ordering an admiral to fall on his sword and take responsibility, and forcing political appointees at NOAA to say his lie was actually the truth. Orwell has been mentioned a lot. And again, we could spend the entire show on that, and I do feel like I'm giving it short shrift. But yes, as a matter of fact, Paul Krugman had a good summation of the problem, which I think I tucked away in pocket, but if not, I certainly retweeted, which is just basically, this is the tip of I guess, a different iceberg. That is that, this is just the beginning. We've already now reached the place where Trump is ordering people to, who are scientists, who are depended on for true statements, to say the opposite at his command, and to think about what else could be screwed up this way is very concerning. As he says here, now imagine the same thing happening as happened with NOAA. Now imagine the same thing happening to the agencies that produce employment, inflation, and growth statistics. This is because he's an economist. I get into this. It's not hard to see it happening. And just like that, we're a third world nation. I need statistics to say this about unemployment. I need statistics to say that about growth. I need statistics like this to say something about the Electoral College. Now, why not, right? I lost. No, I didn't. Say I didn't and see what happens. Why not? Is that now out of the realm of possibility? That's something different from what he's doing? No, I don't think so. Okay. I have much, much more to say about this, but let's again stick with Digby just for the moment. Then Trump had an angry Twitter tantrum on Saturday night, announcing that he was canceling a secret meeting with leaders of the Taliban that had apparently been scheduled for Sunday morning at Camp David. Again, here I bring up this point. News organizations need to adopt the standard that anything he says just needs to be prefaced with purportedly. I honestly do not believe. I'm not just kidding. I honestly do not believe there was any meeting at Camp David with the Taliban scheduled at all. There's a variance out there. He declared it was going to happen and was totally serious in pushing for it to happen in a day, but nobody else was there. But I think it may actually have been, no, that wasn't going to happen, and even Trump knew it wasn't scheduled to happen. He just needed people to think it was going to happen so that he could make whatever stupid point he was making. It wasn't happening. The high-level talks with the Chinese over tariffs, he said that was happening. It wasn't happening. I have a signed agreement with Mexico about tariffs. That wasn't happening. I mean, it turned out he had something on a piece of paper that said, whatever we agreed to, and we'll do some stuff. There was nothing. He had a press conference. I'm separating myself from the businesses. All this paperwork here in front of me proves it. There was nothing on the papers. That wasn't happening. None of those things were happening. This happens all the time. This is the 95th time, and he even uses the same setup every time. And I parodied it with a tweet in his voice, over the weekend. The Taliban called me, begging for a meeting. Big, strong, tough Taliban guy. Tears streaming down his eyes, running down his eyes. That's what I love. He loves to say things that way. Tears running down his eyes, which is not a thing that you say about people. And he's begging me, and he's saying, sir, please, thank you. Thank you for working to end the war. But I said no. We're not going to have that meeting. I had to say no. Because reasons. There was a bombing. Bad thing to do if you're entering into peace talks. But remember, now he's claiming I called off the peace talks because they set off a bomb. It killed an American serviceman and 11, I think, other people. Which, sometimes we try to remember those other people that get killed in this stuff. And so I can't be sitting down to peace talks with them. And then out come the cheerleaders saying, yeah, he should cancel those talks. It's a good thing because they never should have happened in the first place, which is the subtext here. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo out there still saying it's a good idea. Tells everybody, well, don't worry about it. We were sitting down for peace talks, but only because we're kicking their ass so bad. We killed 1,000 Taliban last week alone. So we're canceling the big peace talks because they killed one of our service members. But they were totally going to come here to Camp David and have a meeting, even though we killed 1,000 of them last week alone. Yeah. Okay. Well, this is really working out great. Anyway, it's all fake, and at best, honestly, you can't go wrong. You can't run afoul of the truth by hearing this pronouncement or seeing this tweet. Oh, I'm canceling the Camp David secret meeting. And if you're going to report on it, you say, Trump claims without basis, as they love to say, that he had a meeting scheduled for Sunday, purportedly, to discuss peace talks. No one believes it because no one ever heard of it before. All right. Again, I keep threatening to go back to Digby. According to this TikTok in the New York Times, she says, Trump has decided to inject himself into the later stages of the negotiation with this Camp David gambit. So it sounds like he actually was trying to arrange, and the government was actually involved in trying to arrange some sort of talks. Camp David wasn't a part of it. Nobody knew about this. And Trump did say, nobody knew, but I was going to have it because you made it up. It's like the Canadian girlfriend ploy. And everything else, right? Once somebody rejects it, when somebody says, I will not accept the position in the Trump administration, he says, that person was begging me for a job, and I said no. And now they're saying they're not going to take a job to cover up because I am the one who said no. We've seen it a million times. And yet people don't write about it this way in the news side for some reason. It's perfectly fair to do now. Your legal team will allow it. I guarantee it. You got plenty of backup. So, okay. So there were negotiations going on, and he ruined them with this Camp David thing. But the whole thing was upended, as she points out, by his egomaniacal desire to one-up Jimmy Carter and get credit for a big peace deal without having the first clue of what he was doing or understanding the stakes. One of the parties he wanted for his photo op was anathema to the Taliban. He was going to bring in all the parties here, by the way. So they balked, and then the whole thing fell apart. Supposedly when Trump suddenly realized the Taliban was still killing people. Nobody can quite figure out why he tweeted it out. One gets the feeling he doesn't know either. Those two stories dominated the news this weekend, but there was another brewing that will start to come into focus this week. That is, if Democrats do what they say they're going to do. Congressional committees are reconvening, and new reporting indicates that they have more information about Trump's corruption than has been made public, which is incredible that there's even more. A couple of weeks ago, I wondered if President Trump wasn't hedging his bets a little on 2020 by accelerating his usual promotional activities for his properties. On some level, he must know that he's vulnerable, and perhaps he sees that his window for using his power to benefit himself may be closing. In the last week, we've received even more evidence that he's been quite successful at dipping his beak ever since he became president. Last Friday, Politico reported that the House has been investigating a strange incident in which the Air Force made an unusual refueling stop at a small government-owned airport in Scotland that just happened to be next to Trump's failing golf course in Turnberry. The crew was befuddled at the order, and even more so when they ended up at Trump's pricey club, feeling out of place and without enough per diem money to buy food and drink. It was, to say the least, unexpected. The reporting shows that many millions of dollars were spent since 2017 at this out-of-the-way little airport. And more than just those airmen were shuttled to Turnberry to funnel government money into Trump's pocket. The Guardian reported that the airport gives complimentary rounds of golf and discounted rooms to some of the military personnel who stay at Turnberry, which suggests this is an orchestrated racket. It's highly unlikely that Trump would have directly given an order to do this. As Mike Pence's spokesman said when the Veep was criticized for staying at Trump's Doonbeg resort on his recent trip to Ireland, it's more like the president just suggests it. More likely, people just know that pleasing Trump by putting money in his pocket is smart politics. He does love money. And by the way, that wasn't the only story out there. And one I won't also get to is the New York Times reporting, and they probably... Digby probably mentions this coming up, and I probably could just let it roll. But apparently, New York Times had a big article about how many people spend their time and their money hanging out at the Trump Hotel in Washington for the same reason. Okay, so it may be that this is not technically illegal. It actually, I think we're fine on that. It is technically illegal. I think we could probably prove that. But it certainly appears to be massively unethical, especially if what the Guardian reports about the Scottish government's involvement turns out to be true. An investigation by the Guardian has revealed that Glasgow Prestwick Airport is a base for live missions by the U.S. Air Force, while its executives have highlighted its close relations with President Trump's nearby resort at Turnberry to promote its bid to become a spaceport backed by the U.S. government. Space Force is going to pay for all this eventually. I guess. The Scottish government knew all about this, apparently, clear back to Trump's presidential campaign. If anyone still cared about the Constitution, that emoluments clause would clearly be in play here. From the looks of it, that clause is only in effect for presidents who take bags of cash in a paper bag from a foreign potentate, and I'm not even certain that would apply. Other than that it's no longer operative, and presidents are now allowed to take as much money from foreign governments as can be channeled into the businesses they refused to divest from when they became president. If the next Republican president isn't already a businessman, he'll have to set up some pass-through corporations so that he too can legally receive bribes from foreign governments. Politico reported on Sunday that the Air Force was conducting a full review of the process after, quote, additional instances of military personnel staying at Trump properties have been uncovered. But Air Force personnel aren't the only ones putting taxpayer money into Donald Trump's Turnberry coffers. The Scotsman reported in 2018 that the State Department had paid for staffers to stay at the resort, and that family members' Secret Service details routinely spend thousands of dollars at Trump hotels, Turnberry included, when their charges, that is the people they're guarding, there we go, when their charges travel. It's a confusing use of the word charges there in this context. That's nothing compared to the money that Republican officials, foreign dignitaries, and fans spend at the Trump hotels, whose profits go directly into the president's pockets. Nobody knows exactly how much money is being spent, but it's in the tens of millions, the New York Times reported over the weekend. Since Mr. Trump became president, there have been thousands of visits to his properties, not only by Mr. Trump himself, but by foreign leaders, lobbyists, Republican candidates, members of Congress, cabinet members, and others with ties to the president. At least 90 members of Congress, 250 Trump administration officials, and more than 110 foreign officials have been spotted at Trump properties since 2017, according to social media posts and counts by various watchdog groups. That is undoubtedly a low estimate, and nobody knows how much money is really being spent. Some are looking for favors, some probably just want to be seen, and some simply want to give the president money because they love him so much. President Trump, here's a quote, has really been on the side of evangelicals, and we want to do everything we can to make him successful, said Sharon Boland Yerby, an evangelical minister from Dallas who had dinner at the hotel last fall and then headed over to the White House the next day for a faith briefing of religious leaders. And if that means having dinner or staying in his hotel, we are going to do so. This corruption in plain sight by Republicans, lobbyists, foreign dignitaries, and supporters, Trump excuses it by saying that people just like his product and claiming that he's actually lost $3 billion to $5 billion in this presidential deal. He loves the 3 and the 5. 3 to 5 million illegal votes, $3 to $5 billion lost, right? How could anyone possibly object if he makes a few measly million from people who appreciate his greatness? All right, yeah, we got big trouble. And that's probably all we're even going to have a chance to get to today. There's an awful lot more. I will point out that this is not necessarily a brand new story, and that media in Scotland, it is pointed out here in a tweet from Will Donnelly, facts do matter, Will Donnelly, who writes that the media in Scotland had this story in June of 2019, a couple months ago. The Trump administration have signed a refueling contract with Prestwick and have had 650 refuels there since October of last year. On October 1st, they're due to extend the refueling contract until September of 2024. I wonder if that's a significant date of any kind. Okay, well, very interesting. And again, still, we haven't gotten to some of the bigger things. One of the big things that broke during the show, as a matter of fact, and I guess I'll just quickly make mention of it just so that you know I know, and we'll give a shot at discussing it tomorrow. Another exclusive report, this time from CNN Politics. Exclusive, U.S. extracted top spy from inside Russia in 2017. Now, why is that a big story? Well, apparently we extracted our top spy inside Russia because we were afraid that Donald Trump would give him away, blabbermouth, or do it on purpose and tell Putin, who is our top spy there, to curry favor with the person. This man, Putin, that is, not our spy. We wouldn't be currying any favor with him that way by revealing him. But I don't know. It's a weird habit that Republican administrations have, selling out our top clandestine agents for some strange reason, and we don't seem to be able to discourage the behavior. It's very weird. It did happen in the George W. Bush administration, of course. Scooter Libby and Dick Cheney outing our top non-proliferation, or some top non-proliferation assets, and they really weren't held to account for it, which by some people's reckoning will lead future administrations, or at least future Republican administrations, to do the same or worse. And lo, they have done so. If only someone had told the president in between, President Obama, at some point, and I would like to say that I would nominate, I would guess May 20th, 2009 or so would have been a great time to tell him to his face that that's exactly what would happen, and that the next Republican administration would do all the same and worse unless we did something about it. But anyway, he wasn't interested. So there we have it. In a previously undisclosed secret mission in 2017, the United States successfully extracted from Russia one of its highest levels covert sources inside the Russian government. Multiple Trump administration officials with direct knowledge told CNN, and I bet they're proud of themselves, we saved his life. But of course, he only had to be extracted over concerns that President Donald Trump and his administration repeatedly mishandled classified intelligence and could contribute to exposing the covert source as a spy. Thanks, Don.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, look, the only answer to being this far behind on all the news is to stay tuned for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. That's the only way you'll be able to catch up on stories like Trump isn't just soliciting Ukraine's help with his presidential campaign, which we've talked about. He's using desperately needed U.S. military aid to extort it. It gets worse. Stay tuned.